Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Wario Land 2. Alternate Final Chapter 1, Story 4, coming back is difficult. In the last part, we started off our first of two alternate final chapters, and now we're gonna go finish this off and make our way towards the final alternate chapter within the game. So, this stage is effectively a back and forth. We are going as deep in the level as we can to hit a block swapping switch in order to make the blocks swap states, of course, and make our way back towards the entrance where the gold door already was. This level's honestly pretty straightforward. The thing that's really neat is that it's very calm on the way through, no enemies in sight, but on the way back, there's going to actually be enemies. In a way, it's kind of like the start of Super Metroid. If you know, you know. There are still some hidden rooms you can access along the way on top of some light switches you can turn on and off. But this is probably the easiest level overall within this alternate chapter. If only because it's just smaller and there's not as many side pathways. Thankfully, this level also doesn't have much in the way of, like, weirdly punishing falls where you need to backtrack a lot. Even at the end of the level, once the block state is swapped, if you just fall off near the goal, you can just jump back around to get to it again. In a lot of regards, it does feel like some of the levels within a world in this game don't really have a solid difficulty curve, but that's probably also the point, because it's to highlight kind of the all-over-the-place nature of Wario as a character, and like the comedy of it all, especially as the series progressed. Because even like Wario Land 4, I'd say each of its worlds are subsequently harder, but because you can tackle them in any order, they more accurately have a rising difficulty curve within each individual world to deal with those mechanics, and then you just kind of boost into the highest difficulty by the end game because of the structure of it all. Although thinking about it, structurally at least, this level's actually a lot closer to how the levels in 4 would be structured in terms of the objective, going in and then getting back out. Just there's A, no timer, and B, no really horrifying music. Also, this is really something I should have mentioned last time, so I'll probably put an edit in about this last time. These dressers that we once jumped on when they were on top of water back in Wario's castle in Chapter 1. In this chapter, there's almost always a good chance that they're going to contain a ghost by default. The one that I broke in this specific room that just had a coin is one of the few that doesn't have a ghost by default. So if you see one of those dressers, largely you probably shouldn't break it because it'll usually just hit you with a zombie status you probably don't want for one reason or another at that specific point in time. We do want to go low here, though, because for one thing we need to for level design, but also it's where the treasure hunt room for this specific stage is, and well, for 100% we kind of need that, don't we? Now, I'm not sure what it is in specific about this set of levels, but I think they're actually the levels that benefited the most from the Game Boy Color palette introductions. There's something about this set of colors that just works well together for the horror stages, I think. You could say the black and white also works well for that, especially given how many iconic horror movies are, you know, still in black and white. But there's just something about it that fits really well to me. A lot of the other color palettes as well also feel very, I'm not gonna say by the numbers, but like you expect it, kind of. Like, the forest level is green, the castle level is either a purple or a red. The underground shiny ruins are like golden and all that. You don't see many horror levels this neon green and pinkish purple. Usually if they're gonna do that, it's like kind of the radical type, TMNT type sci-fi horror. Most horror levels go for like the black and white or the browns by default, so this looks really nice in that regard. That's that level done and over with, though, so now we're heading on to the final level of this particular alternate final chapter. And, another one of my least favorite bosses in the game, honestly. Time for Wario to steal a job from Luigi he technically didn't even have yet at this point in time, because alternate Final Chapter 1's 5th story is Capture the Ghost. Now, in my memory, this is one of the larger boss stages the game has to offer. But a lot of that I think just comes from one specific room that I usually spend a little too long in trying to get every coin out of it. To the point where I think when I was editing this, I just decided to speed that entire thing up because otherwise we would be there for like an extra 2 minutes or so. And that wasn't really what I was feeling like doing commentary-wise. Frankly, this game is exhausting to play by this point, unless you take a break. Commentating over it is even harder, as there's only so many ways I can talk about how Wario feels in this game or how his mechanics will influence the specific mechanics the stage has, when there's 50 levels that are pretty similar at the end of the day. I'm very glad there's only 2 parts left. I'm never gonna say that I'm regretting doing the LP. I don't think that's a fun thing to say in any regard, basically. But there are games where by the end I definitely am feeling the weight of the length of the game. Honestly, I was kind of surprised though, like Pokemon Ranger was one I was expecting that to deal with. I don't think I did from my memory. I struggle to think of which game gave me the most of that exact issue though. A couple come to mind, especially when it came to like really extended post games the game probably didn't need. Hi, Starfy 1 treasure hunting. But I can't really think of the ultimate victor of that. Technically speaking, it actually may have been an LP I did near the start when I was just not knowing what I was doing yet, technically. Oh, I accidentally left that white flash in. No, and I'm leaving that one in. You get to see what the white flashes that I'm in the loading screens look like. Hopefully that's the only one of those I left in. I think I've not noticed any others. Oops. Now, we're technically as far away from the boss room as we can be in the level in some regards right now. But that's because we want to escort this stove in this room over to the corner to hit a switch to swap the block states, as that will allow us to then access the treasure room from this room in specific. Coming up, though, the next room where the switch is, there's another one of those zombie enemies. Something I forget if I've talked about with them or not is that while, yes, they can turn you into the zombie status pretty easily. For one thing, that's pretty self-defeating because walking into them, as we've seen before in the LP, will just kill them instantly with that. But their hitbox for destroying them without using the zombie status has always been weird. It's like you need to touch their body while crouching, while their head's thrown out, but even then they can respawn after a moment. It's never really been too clear to me on what causes them to fade away like that. It seems kind of inconsistent, you know, if it works every time I try it, just at weird, inconsistent timings. There's a reason they're actually one of my least favorite enemies to deal with in the game, because I just can never quite figure out what makes it go my way or their way. Don't destroy that dresser. Once again, there's another ghost in there more than likely, and that will just make me unable to enter the door, so I'd have to travel around the room once again to get things done, and that just doesn't sound very fun, now does it? With that treasure now out of the way, it's time for us to go find the boss fight and take care of that. But before we do that, we actually do need to swap the blocks back into their other state they were in a moment ago. Because the main room that leads to the boss room, well, at least it leads to the room that leads to the boss room, more accurately, is the room that we've been turning blocks on and off to get around in. And at the moment, if I'd gone back priorly, they would have had just like a giant wall blocking my way right about here. If memory serves, in this specific level, if you get ejected from the boss fight, you get effectively sent to a room that leads to the room with all the enemy blocks I sped up earlier. But I want to quickly take care of some more enemy blocks here to grab some more extra coins that I really do not need. To the point where the next world in specific is where there's a notable gameplay shift with how I handle things. But there's also a secondary reason for that I'll get into starting next part that might involve behind-the-scenes issues. But again, I'll save that for next time. Now, the boss of this world actually has a surprising amount in common with the fish boss back during the Ruins world, in that its main attack is gonna be to grab us. And that will just eject us outright, of course. With that said, I think it's much harder to avoid than the fish, which is why it's kind of a rough fight in my opinion. Because the boss of this world, as we'll see in a moment, is effectively meant to be the ghosts that we're here to capture. Its attack is to sweep in from above and try to grab you. Your goal here is to keep yourself moving left and right so that it tries to track onto where you were rather than where you are, then dash jump into it. As the fight continues, though, it starts varying the way it sweeps down. It will actually try to do a sweep outwardly, diagonally like that to try and grab you, which can really throw you off and all that. And towards the end of it, it really starts speeding up in a way that can be kind of rough to deal with. This boss never feels comfortable to fight, in my opinion. But that's Alternate Final Chapter 1 completed! Kind of rough in some places, but I ultimately still like playing through this chapter. It's just the fact that at this point, I'm getting exhausted both playing it and commentating over it. But, as usual though, I'll see you after the credits for our current endgame totals and for us to start off the next chapter. Having done another 5 stages as usual, our end game completion rates are raised another 10% to 90% each. Only 5 hidden stages remain, and like the previous set rather, we once again access them through a stage back in Chapter 4. And honestly, this is probably the most obvious one of the set in terms of the aesthetics, because otherwise in the campaign we only saw this tile set get used once. It's time for us to head back to the factory. This is one of the more well-hidden exits in the game, too. As we need to break blocks that really the only way you can tell they're breakable is by seeing other trends elsewhere in the room that it's in, or otherwise. We want to head back to the main room where we're flopping switches back and forth to get some extra coins in this stage. In specific, you might remember on the lower chunk of this next room, there were the dogs or walruses or whatever that actively throw bottles at you. There's also some up here, but then there's the 2 down below. One of the purple blocks, near the one on the left, is secretly breakable. And then that leads to an entire different chunk of level design that we could have accessed earlier. The main reason I didn't access it earlier in the LP was because I already had enough coins in this level, and there was a point where I was just like, yeah, that's too much even for this one little level. Ground pound through here, and you can go either right or left. Right just leads to more coins. Left is what actually leads to the end of the level, but I'm showcasing the right just to be like, yeah, no, this level's really lucrative if that wasn't obvious already based on what we saw earlier in the LP. Now, the path to the left looks like it's pretty small, but there is yet another hidden breakable block over there that, honestly, I think the only way you can figure out it's breakable without just messing around and hitting every block you possibly can is noticing how that this room is otherwise very symmetrical, so if there was something hidden on the right like that, there's gonna be something on the left. In specific, if we now ground pound this purple block in the middle, we can get through an entire new section level design and get our way to the hidden room on the far left. That door leads towards the hidden exit. I'm just growing up here to grab this extra set of coins, because why not at this point? So now once we get back there, we're going to be in the room that actually has the hidden exit. And reaching the hidden exit itself is pretty straightforward. We just have to do a brief little flat Wario platforming section. In fact, get used to seeing flat Wario. It might showcase itself pretty clearly in the next couple levels. Technically, this is one of the more cleverly hidden exits, which is probably why, additionally, the 5 levels after this are considered the final 5 for panel pieces and treasure counts. But at the end of the day, the levels they chose to put the hidden exits in are some of the smaller ones in the game by and large, so there's only so many places you can check. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 15, we go through a majority of the final alternate chapter. See you guys then.